Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, March 27th, 2022, and just 2 days ago, a decision was struck down from the Maryland court that showed that their map, the congressional map, a gerrymander that I've pointed out multiple times, has been stricken down, saying that this was illegal, that it should not have been drawn this way. Now, if you're wondering what happened, the court was stricken down by a Democratic-appointed judge, meaning, a Democratic governor, I believe 17 years ago, appointed this judge to a Maryland court. And through this Maryland court, I believe that they call things a little bit differently. In the state of Maryland, we don't actually have a Maryland Supreme Court. There's actually an initiative on the ballot to rename our current Court of Appeals, but our Court of Appeals essentially serves as our MD Supreme Court. For whatever reason, we don't refer to it as such. We will see what happens in November, and maybe in a year from now, I'll be calling it something entirely different. But a state court actually struck down this map, saying that it was illegal. Now, looking at the congressional map that had been passed, this was intentionally a Democratic gerrymander. If you want to know what happened, essentially, the Democrats looked at the old congressional map and said, we need to do more. They said we need to be more aggressive. Looking at the Maryland map, you already know from the 2020 election, or at least I'm telling you, that 7 Democrats were able to win and 1 Republican was able to win. It was an 8-seat delegation, and the 7-1 right here was what the Democratic Party wanted to avoid for 2022, or at least make more difficult. And the reason why they wanted to make it more difficult is because Andy Harris hasn't really lost a singular race in quite some time now. The last time the Democrats were able to win in the 1st congressional district, I believe, was in 2008 in the state of Maryland. And even at that point in time, or sorry, not 2008, 2008, but even then, the Democrats still actually lost the 6th congressional district that the Republican Party held. The 1st district went to the Democrat by 0.79. The Republican returned 2 years later, won by 12 points, returned 2 years later after that, and won by 36 percentage points. So what you know from the Maryland 1st district is that it used to be a Republican stronghold. Even in 2018, the Democratic Party could not even crack the safe margin that Andy Harris had. He went on to 2020 to win by 27 instead of 21, but the point being that this district was always meant for Republican representation and intentionally cut out certain regions of the state in order to keep in the Republican vote consolidated throughout the 1st congressional district. Now, in the new proposal that the Maryland Democrats put forth and passed without the approval from the governor because he vetoed it, but they overrode the veto with their supermajorities, what the map actually ended up doing was this commission proposal, and it was a previously enacted proposal. Let's see if we can actually find it right here. What it did was turned our Maryland map here into a 7 Democratic district map and 1 competitive district. Now, this is the old map. Every single district here is solid blue, which you might be thinking, okay, why would Democrats give up some of these districts and make them less blue? But honestly, D plus 12 means it's Biden plus 15 or more. D plus 11 means it's Biden plus 15 or more. They know these districts are not going to be competitive. They know with incumbents that they will be solid. And just looking at the map, just see how true this gerrymander actually is. In Maryland's 4th district, Anthony Brown ended up winning, ends up being ahead by 62 points, but that district was drawn in such a way that it cut out certain regions of the 5th district. Now, I currently live in the previously enacted 4th district. I used to live in the 5th district. Honestly, I would prefer to live in the 5th district. Down my road, actually across the street from me, is the 5th district. It seems pretty intentional if I'm being completely honest. So in a way, I'm kind of happy that this map was stricken down. I'm happy because it does actually end up resulting in more Democratic representation, but I'm happy also because maybe now there's a chance that Steny Hoyer will remain my representative. I kind of like being under the House Majority Leader. I think it gives me some type of importance just living where I am, but that's besides the point. Looking at the Maryland map here, the real intention of this map was not to decrease Democratic support in the 6th district or decrease it in the 2nd, and there was no real reason for doing that, besides the fact that Maryland's 1st district becomes Republican plus 8. Now, look at this region over here. This is the Annapolis, Anne Arundel County area. Now, that doesn't mean much to you if you're not from the state of Maryland, but you should know that that region of the state is generally pro-Democrat, and it was grabbed in for a reason. There is no land connection between this portion of the district and the district over here. The district over here contains our beaches, contains our, towns along the water. You have people that are Republican through and through. You have rural voters. You have conservative voters, and they are kept in the 1st district by the old map intentionally. But this new congressional map decided to dilute the Republican representation. Instead of giving them their own district, they instead captured in this portion of a much more Democratic area, a significantly more Democratic area, to bring the district down from what was a partisan lean of Republican plus 28 and turn it into a Republican lean of 8. That is a significant shift. A significant shift. I wonder why. I wonder why. You're looking at this as a Democrat. You're looking at this saying, this gerrymander was put in place to advance Democratic agendas. And why would a Maryland court strike this down? Well, the honest answer, I think, is that they don't think this is fair. I don't think this is fair. No, I see this as the Democratic Party is in a position where they have had so many redistricting wins that they were going to ultimately end up falling somewhere. I mean, this is truly one of the only real major victories that the Republican Party has had in terms of the courts. There have been some states that have decided to reject some of the proposals, but in almost all of the big ones, Ohio, North Carolina, the Democratic Party has done pretty well at that. Looking at the current stance of the Democratic Party across the nation, they are set to gain 11 Democratic-leaning seats. Republicans are expected to lose 6. The state of Maryland, while a loss for the Democratic Party, is relatively inconsequential. In 2022, I think Democrats were very much expecting the Republican Party to win this district. The hope was that in 24, in 26, and 28, depending on the type of year, depending on the type of year, red wave, blue wave, the Democrats could actually win this district. That was never attainable in the past. I'd like to say that, I think that the courts were right in this decision. And I do agree with that. I think what we are going to find now is that Democrats are going to try to bring this to a higher court. Who are they going to bring it to? Well, they're going to bring it to our Court of Appeals. Now, who is the Court of Appeals? Well, this is a court that has an age cap. It is our Maryland Supreme Court. We just don't go by that. Looking at the current delegation that is currently on the court, the nominees here are Larry Hogan, and Martin O'Malley, right? And a seat vacant. That tells me that this court is not going to be lenient towards the Democratic Party at any position, at any point. Truly, I look at this and I say, the Maryland delegation should be Democrat, but it isn't, because Larry Hogan was elected back in 2013, and there were a number of mandatory retirements. Look at this mandatory retirement list. What do you have? You have 2022. You have 2024. Well, guess what? One of those 2022s just resigned. What you're finding here is that Larry Hogan has appointed people that will be in the Maryland Court of Appeals for decades. He has packed this court, and not in the sense that, this is an undemocratic process, just more so that he was able to. Because Democrats were unable to win the governor's races in 2014 and 2018. The current position right now is that the Democratic Party is not going to be able to appoint anybody new, except for maybe the 4th Circuit Court of Appeals judge. Potentially that. Beyond there, there's going to be some Republicans on here. It's likely going to be a 6-1 Republican advantage on the Maryland Court of Appeals, which means that later down the line, should Democrats have a court map that is brought up to them, they will likely strike it down as well. The Maryland Democratic Party going so far to an extreme caused them to lose this map, and very well could force them to draw a fair map. The state of Maryland is not a state that goes for, the Democratic Party by a 7-1 ratio. It is not. The state of Maryland went to Joe Biden with 65% of the vote. Yes, it makes sense for Democrats to be ahead. No, it does not make sense for them to be ahead 7-1. You're talking about 83% representation. 83%. 83-17. That is not fair. Now, at the end of the day, what does this mean, right? What is this going to do on the national level? Honestly, probably not much. I think what the Democratic Party might end up seeing is that this district is completely shored up. Andy Harris is completely fine by the next election and for the next 10 years. But looking at the remaining districts, it's very possible that the remaining districts end up being drawn in a more competitive position. Remember that old map that I showed you from 2008, in which the Democratic Party was able to win Andy Harris's district but still lost one? Well, this is a type of map in 2010 that I think is a little bit better represented, that can show you what we might be able to expect in the next coming years. They might completely draw out David Trone's district. He used to represent, or does represent, the 6th district, and they might make it Republican, and then keep the 1st district as an overwhelmingly Republican district. What you might find is that the Democratic Party is going to see them win 5 districts, but lose 6 districts, but lose 2. That's different from where it was before. If they were able to be in a position where, they could have had a 7-1. I think the Democratic Party honestly should have gone through with that. I think a 7-1, while still a gerrymander, and you can just see how these districts are drawn, while still a gerrymander, does provide the 7-1 delegation that went through the courts before, that was fine before, that might not be struck down. I think this Maryland Democrat in the court sees this as just simply an unfair move, right? That you are turning the only Republican district, the only voice for Republicans from Maryland, into a competitive district that they very well could lose in 2024 or 2026. And honestly, if Donald Trump was reelected in 2022, looking at the map here, I think the Democratic Party really made a mistake. This map was meant to be a win. Democrats actually at one point even considered an 8-0 map. I'm going to show you that because that was even more of an aggressive gerrymander. But I promise you that no matter what map they would have chosen besides the 7-1 map, and even then that one might have been struck down, the Maryland court was going to come around. This is the map that the Maryland Democratic Party thought about. It was an 8-0 map. What it did was turn Andy Harris's district from Republican plus 28 to Republican plus 1, shifting it 27%. I think, honestly, I'm in this district now, in this proposal that I would be, because they're not drawing it that differently from the 5th. I honestly think I'm in this new 1st district if that was to be the actual proposal. It would be very interesting to go from Steny Hoyer to be represented by a Republican, but I can guarantee you, this district would have gone blue in 24, and very well could have in 2022. But it would have lessened the Democratic Party's strength in many other districts. But my main takeaway from this is that because the Democratic Party went forth with a map such as this, it really screwed them over. It put them in a position where the Maryland courts just simply could not ignore it any longer, right? When you see Maryland gerrymanders in a bunch of other states, what do you have? You have Illinois, you have New York, you have states where Democrats can be pretty solid about the outcome should it go to the eventual Supreme Court. But in the state of Maryland, they don't have that security. There's a lot of discussion that this will go to the Court of Appeals, but I can guarantee you, just based off who has been nominated, just based off of who are in these positions, that these Court of Appeals justices are going to uphold the overturning of the map. The map has until, I believe, May 30th to draw a new congressional map, or March 30th, and I think that is when we should expect to see a new map. It is a bit of a tricky topic now that we're talking about a bunch of different maps going in and out of being secure or not. You have Missouri, which can't really agree. You have Florida, which can't agree. You have Louisiana that just got vetoed. You have New Hampshire, which is going to get vetoed. Maryland is now adding itself back into the mix as a state that is completely without congressional districts and congressional representation for 2022. But I am hopeful we will get a new one soon. I'm hopeful we will get one. I don't think it's going to be March 30th. Let's see what the date actually was. I think it was May 30th. Let's go ahead and see where the decision... redraw the maps by March 30th. Interesting. They might end up throwing back another map that is just as much of a gerrymander, but less so. So hopefully, in their eyes, the court decides that it's fine. But honestly, I can't imagine this court making it, this map, making it super far. This is just an egregious gerrymander, if we're putting it honestly. But the Democratic Party knows what they're doing when it comes down to drawing maps, whereas the Republican Party has had some trouble. I hope they don't put forth the same exact congressional map like what we saw in the state of Ohio. The state of Ohio looks like the map is going to be forcibly redrawn by the Supreme Court. There was a bit of a filing error here for the Democratic Party, which made a lot of trouble for them, but ultimately the Supreme Court is going to rule on that map, and they are likely going to strike it down. What I see in the state of Maryland is that the Democratic Party, at least hopefully, will put forth a fairer map. They will put forth a map that is ultimately, going to be used for the next 10 years, and that won't be stricken down by the courts, but only time will tell, truly speaking. I think that the courts here have seen that on a bunch of election ratings too, that the only district that is competitive outside of the state of Maryland is Maryland's 1st. That is the only district that is competitive. Nothing else. You're looking at 7 districts that are safe D and 1 district that is lean R. Does that seem fair for the state? Honestly, no. So I think these courts are going to be a little bit more lenient on the Democratic Party than maybe the Ohio courts were on the Republican Party, because they did allow for maps in the past that were nearly as egregious and nearly as aggressive in terms of the gerrymandering strategy that the Democratic Party has put forth in the state of Maryland. But ultimately, I do think that, the Democratic Party is not going to be the ones benefiting from this. If anything, it's going to be the GOP. The GOP very well could see an increase in potentially 1 or 2 seats based off what they were expecting for 2022, based off of these new maps. Honestly, you're talking about maybe 2 Republican districts. It doesn't make sense to have 5-3. That's not really a map that is necessarily possible when it comes down to the state of Maryland. Who knows, though? Gerrymandering has been so rampant throughout the state on both sides in historical context that it's really hard to see how a state could go in either direction. But it's possible, I'm sure, to draw 3 Republican districts. I just don't think it's going to be easy. So At the end of the day, main takeaway here is the Maryland map has been struck down, and this is now the Democratic Party's first major redistricting loss. And I think that's where the concern comes in for the Democratic Party, but truly it is mainly inconsequential when it comes down to overall party control, but still a big loss for the Democratic Party that they weren't really expecting. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.